Hello. My name is Alex Ryder, and this is the story of how I managed to break out of the darkest abyss, through pain, loss, and doubt, to achieve what others would call the American dream. But my dream didn't fall into my hands. I tore it out, with bloodied hands, a burned heart, and a soul the world wanted to crush into dust. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, in 1993. The city was already a shadow of its former self, the cradle of the American auto industry, slowly suffocating in the smog of the recession. My father worked at Ford until he was laid off. My mother was a nurse who worked 2 jobs so we could have something for dinner. I was 10 years old when I first saw my family cry, not out of grief, but out of helplessness. I was bullied at school. I was too quiet, too poor, too weird. But I had one thing that no one could take away, a dream. I wanted to be an inventor. Not just an engineer, a creator. I imagined myself in my own lab, surrounded by screens, microcircuits, prototypes. I drew devices that would change the world. But drawings don't feed. At 17, I worked nights at a gas station, studied during the day, and tried not to break down in the middle. I once saved a man who was almost robbed. I simply stood between him and the attacker. He turned out to be a professor at a technical college. A week later, he came to me with an offer, a scholarship to a mechatronics program. I accepted it without a second thought. It was the first ray of light in my tunnel. College was brutal. Not in terms of knowledge, I could handle that. But I was a stranger among strangers. Poor, unconnected, and insecure. I lived in a library basement, working construction jobs. I was starving. But every microchip, every schematic, every broken prototype was my way of telling the world, I haven't given up yet. I graduated college at 22 with nothing but debt, an old laptop, and a folder of blueprints. I applied to dozens of companies. No answers. One recruiter bluntly said, "We're looking for people from, well, not from the streets." I was at rock bottom again. But this time I had the tools. I started creating. In a friend's garage, I put together my first smart mechanic's glove, one that recognized my movements and transmitted instructions through vibrations. I posted the video on TikTok. It got 50 views. A week later, it got 500. Then it got 2 million. People were saying, "Dude, this is a game changer." A company in Texas offered to partner with me. I went there with a backpack and a dream. We founded a startup called ArcTech. 3 people, 1 idea, to create tools that help people work safely and smartly. But success is not a story of constant growth. We were cheated out of a patent. Our ideas were stolen. An investor backed out at the last minute. I sat on the steps of the office, watching our desks being carted away. And all I could think was, again? But I was different now. I didn't cry. I wrote 200 emails. One of them, by chance, was opened by the R&D director of a famous company in Boston. He said, "This is crazy. But it works. Come here." I picked up the pieces of ArcTech and took them to the East Coast. Boston greeted me with rain and skepticism. But this time, I wasn't just a guy with an idea. I was an entrepreneur with failures, scars, and experience. I was given a tiny office in a technology park, some grant money, and complete freedom. In 6 months, I assembled a new team, 3 young engineers just as hungry as I was. We worked 14-hour days. We created a new version of the glove, now with the support of artificial intelligence. It didn't just help the mechanics, it learned along with them. We tested it at a small factory in New Jersey. Within a week, injuries had dropped by 37%. It was a breakthrough. We were invited to speak at CES in Las Vegas. It was my first time on stage in front of thousands of people. At that moment, when I looked out into the hall, it hit me. I remembered the dark basement of the library, hungry evenings, robberies, betrayed trust. And now, an ovation. People stood up. I cried. Publicly. And I wasn't ashamed of it. The next day, representatives from Lockheed Martin, General Electric, and even NASA approached us. I couldn't believe it. But I was ready. We closed the first deal for $5 million. ArcTech was reborn, stronger, bolder, more convincing. But with each success came a new price. I barely saw my family. I lost love. My girlfriend left me, saying, "You chose war with the system over life." She was right. But I couldn't stop in this war. Money is a loud thing. But the silence after success is even louder. A year after the CES speech, we had an office in Silicon Valley, 40 employees, a contract with NASA for an exoskeleton for technicians working in zero gravity. But I didn't feel joy. My phone rang 24/7. I was talking to investors in Japan at 3 a.m., resolving conflicts within the team, choosing between $2 million risks. Everything became black and white. Every win was another stressor. I started losing sleep. Anxiety, chest pains appeared. One day I passed out right in the office. The doctor said, "Alex, you're exhausted. This is burnout. Complete." I laughed, broken, without joy. I took a week off. I drove alone along the California coast, without a phone. I stopped in small towns, talked to people, looked at the ocean. And for the first time in years, I asked myself, why? Was this really what I wanted, or was I just running away from poverty, fear, the past? That week, I met an old mechanic at an abandoned station near Santa Barbara. He was using our first model of the glove. "This thing saved my hand," he said. "But most importantly, it showed my grandson that even an old man can still teach you how to do something." Tears welled up in my eyes. I remembered why I had started all this. I came back not as a CEO, but as a person. I rewrote the structure of the company. I introduced mandatory weekends. I began to hold meetings with every new employee. We were no longer just a business. We became a mission. ArcTech became a benchmark for human progress. We created innovative solutions not only for manufacturing, but also for medicine, education, ecology. Our exoskeletons helped veterans walk again. Smart gloves, teaching children with autism. Each new project was not about profit, but about impact. I was often invited to give lectures at Stanford, MIT, even Oxford. But I always started the same way: I am not a genius. I am a survivor. And what you call success is the marks on my hands and the memory of those who fell before me. I wrote a book, Fire and Mechanisms. It became a bestseller because it spoke honestly about pain and victory, about fear and faith. I started a foundation, for teenagers from poor families who have ideas but don't have a chance. We funded 50 projects. One of them is already changing the water purification system in Africa. And you know what? I finally allowed myself happiness. I returned to my family. I rebuilt the house I grew up in. I restored my relationship with my parents, invited my mother to the first class of a business flight. She cried with joy. I met a woman who wasn't afraid of my past. We got married in a park on the shores of Lake Huron. It couldn't have been simpler. But it was real. My name has appeared on Forbes, Time, entrepreneur lists. But the greatest reward for me is when someone comes up to me and says, "Your story gave me strength." I started too. Because success is not the top. It's a chain. I'm just a link. And if you're reading this, it means the next link is already forming. Fight. Act. Create. Fall and rise. Because true victory is not in avoiding defeats, but in not letting them stop you. And remember, Even ashes can shine if a dream still burns in them. The end. Subscribe.